It's Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. Sparks fly at the White House. Another assimilation update and movement on the COVID vaccine front. Next on the AM Update.
Death, 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 horrible death. White South Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws.
My advice, again, is for anyone who's coming is to hold on to their mother tongue, to hold on to your culture. There's no reason to assimilate.
You cannot have a country where the American people keep on electing immigration enforcement and the courts tell the American people they're not allowed to have what they voted for.
2 Israeli embassy staff were killed outside a Jewish museum in downtown Washington, D.C. The victims, a man and a woman, were shot while exiting an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum. The shooting happened at around 9:05 Eastern Time around 3rd and F Streets Northwest, an area with numerous tourist sites, museums, and government buildings. Reports indicate that multiple employees of the Israel embassy were at a museum event at the time of the shooting. The names of the victims have not yet been released. A spokesman for the Israeli embassy confirmed that 2 staff members were shot at close range while attending the event at the museum. It's a story, of course, that will be dominating today's news coverage across the board. In other news,
shoot to kill, Gaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer, brr, pa, pa, brr, pa.
One in many videos in a montage that President Trump played during the visit of South Africa's president yesterday at the White House. President Donald Trump bringing attention to certain political parties in South Africa who are overtly racist against white South Africans, the Afrikaners, the farmers. You heard there in that little video, one of those many videos that President Trump played at the Oval Office yesterday. Shoot to kill the Boer, that would be the farmer. Here is just one more example of President Trump bringing receipts right to the face of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Death, 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 horrible death, death. I don't know. To pick anyone, white South Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws. And this is all, I'll give these to you.
President Trump came with a stack of stories from recent days of examples of not only just overt racist policies from South Africa, but also killings of white South Africans, the Afrikaners. President Trump will also face some pushback from President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Even in the parliament, and they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is
nothing happens to them.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white. Majority of them are black people, and we have now
the farmers are black. The farmers are not black. I don't say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black, and the people that are being killed in large numbers. And you saw all those grave sites, and those are people that loved ones going. I guess on a Sunday morning, they told me to pay respect to their loved ones that were killed. Their heads chopped off. They died violently, and. We're here to talk about it, and I didn't know we'd get involved here. But I will say this, that if the news wasn't fake, like NBC, which is fake news, totally, one of the worst, ABC, NBC, CBS, horrible. But if they weren't fake news like this jerk that we have here, if we had real reporters, they'd be covering it.
So President Trump right to the face of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, just completely laying waste to this narrative that there is no attempted genocide in South Africa. Back over in Congress, tensions are continuing to run high as the White House keeps pressuring fiscal conservatives to get on board with President Trump's big, beautiful bill. Despite Trump's Hail Mary pitch to Republicans, specifically fiscal conservatives like Congressman Chip Roy and Thomas Massie, so far this week, reconciliation talks seem to be going south. While the Rules Committee wraps up its overnight markup, Republicans are still looking for the off-ramp to get their bill passed. The whole process has been consumed by Republican factions making incompatible demands. The Salt Caucus Republicans were offered a tentative and very generous $40,000 cap for state and local tax deductions. Meanwhile, some members of the House Freedom Caucus have pushed for earlier implementation of Medicaid work requirements. I said earlier this week we would start to get a better picture of what this budget reconciliation bill will end up looking like. So far, it doesn't seem like we've got very much of a clear picture. Well, we had an assimilation update earlier this week out of Miami, Florida. A woman living here for 20 years had a house, 3 children while living illegally in the United States, and she still can't speak English. Well, now there's this. This is Ekhlis Ahmed, a policy analyst for Maine Governor Janet Mills' Office of New Americans, who vows to fight for Sudan. Listen to this.
Maine is a predominantly white state. Many of the communities that I have been a part of have been majority white who have lived here in Maine all of their lives. They haven't even had to travel anywhere or didn't have to wake up to sounds of gunshots. So it was hard. It was hard living here. It's been hard asking Sudanese people to move here in Maine. I don't particularly feel like I'm more Sudanese or more American. I fight for Sudan in all my capacity. My advice, again, is for anyone who's coming is to hold on to their mother tongue, to hold on to your culture, hold on to your religion, to your beliefs. There's no reason to assimilate.
There's no reason to assimilate. Again, that is Ekhlis Ahmed, a policy analyst for Governor Janet Mills' Office of New Americans in Maine. And then there's this news. The Department of Homeland Security has announced this week that Immigration and Customs Enforcement lodged a detainer for a 24-year-old illegal alien from Venezuela who posed as a teenager to attend an Ohio high school. On May 19th, the Perrysburg, Ohio Police Department arrested and charged Anthony Emmanuel Labrador Sierra with forgery. On May 20th, ICE issued a detainer. Assistant Homeland Security Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said in a statement, quote, Anthony Emmanuel Labrador Sierra is a 24-year-old illegal alien from Venezuela who has been posing as a teenager and attending Perrysburg High School in Ohio. Labrador was arrested and charged with forgery by the Perrysburg, Ohio Police Department on May 19th for using fake documents to become enrolled in the high school. ICE lodged a detainer to ensure that this criminal illegal alien is removed from the community and no longer able to prey on the students of Perrysburg High School. It is disturbing that a grown man would impersonate a teenager and infiltrate the lives of underage girls and boys to fool them into doing God knows what. Labrador has been illegally in the United States since March 24th of 2020. On those heels, Vice President JD Vance talked to the New York Times' Ross Douthat this week about just what's at stake with all of these rogue judges trying to get in the way of President Trump's deportation program.
You cannot have a country where the American people keep on electing immigration enforcement, and the courts tell the American people they're not allowed to have what they voted for. And that's where we are right now. We're going to keep working it through the immigration court process, through the Supreme Court as much as possible. And look, success to me is not so much a number, though obviously I'd love to see the gross majority of the illegal immigrants who came in under Biden deported. That actually is a secondary metric of success. Success to me is that we have established a set of rules and principles that the courts are comfortable with and that we have the infrastructure to do that allows us to deport large numbers of illegal aliens when large numbers of illegal aliens come into the country. That, to me, is real success.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio faced questioning from a House panel, particularly Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington, about his revocation of visas for people who are in the country legally, technically, on the invitation of the United States who are trying to rile up trouble.
A student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa
based
on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed. She wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa because she wrote an op-ed.
And we'll do more. We're going to do more. We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
The case. I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people out of our country.
Actually, it's not just about revoking. You actually, Secretary Rubio, excuse me, reclaiming my time. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
I'll just say this, JD Vance is not as much of a shoo-in for 2028 as I previously thought. And that, of course, isn't a knock on JD Vance. Coming up next, there is movement when it comes to pulling the COVID vaccine for most people. And some other news about the COVID vaccine. We'll talk about that and more next. The Food and Drug Administration announced this week it's going to limit access to COVID-19 vaccines going forward to people 65 years old and older and others who are at high risk of becoming seriously ill if they are infected, and will require manufacturers to conduct clinical trials to show whether the vaccines benefit healthy younger adults and children. After weeks of signaling a shift in thinking, the new leaders of the FDA and the agency's division that regulates vaccines published a commentary in the New England Journal of Medicine laying out their plan for future use of COVID vaccines. FDA Commissioner Marty Makary and Vinay Prasad, he's the director of Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, argued that the U.S. approach to recommending COVID vaccination for everybody ages 6 months and older is out of step with the rest of the world and may no longer be needed. This news comes on the heels of this report from the New York Post headlined, "Biden officials knew about potential COVID-19 vaccine risks and took steps to downplay them," according to a scathing Senate report. Here's an excerpt from that piece. Top federal health officials actively took steps to delay warning the public for months in 2021 about the potential risks of heart-related complications from receiving mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. Starting in February of 2021, federal health agencies had been alerted to large reports of myocarditis in young people who received the Pfizer vaccine, but waited until late June that year to adjust the vaccine labels to make that side effect known. Dr. Peter McCullough is a leading cardiologist, and he testified in front of a Senate panel yesterday about myocarditis and the role of the COVID-19 vaccine.
I know the topic well. I've examined thousands of patients with this problem. Thousands. Before the pandemic, I had 2 patients ever with this problem. There's 1,065 papers in the peer-reviewed literature on COVID vaccine myocarditis. So let me summarize them for you. The first one that came on my radar screen that was alarming came from Washington University in St. Louis, August 18th of 2021. The first author is Verma and colleagues, New England Journal of Medicine. 42-year-old man comes into Washington University Hospital with vaccine myocarditis. The infection's ruled out. It's the vaccine. He's in the hospital. This is one of our best hospitals in the United States. He dies 3 days after taking Moderna. They can't save him in the hospital.
Say, Dr. McCullough, move the microphone just a little bit away from you.
Then one was reported from Korea by Choi and colleagues. This is now a younger man. Just a few days after Pfizer, he comes in the hospital. He dies within 8 hours of being in the hospital. I can tell you, I'm a cardiologist. That doesn't even happen with heart attacks. He dies within 8 hours. I examined all of the slides and the images that the Koreans had showed us. It looked like somebody took a blowtorch to that heart. It was so completely fried with inflammation. His heart was destroyed. These cases, which were widely known at the time, should have gotten everyone's attention. Everyone should have been laser focused on this. We should never have someone die after taking a vaccine. That's directly caused to the vaccine. Then Gill and colleagues, Connecticut, published in Archives of Pathology, 2 boys, aged 16 and 17, who die a few days after taking Pfizer. These are teenagers. They're found dead at home by their parents. They're absolutely horrified. They request an autopsy. They call in University of Michigan and University of Minnesota to look over what are they finding at autopsy. Conclusion, it's Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine myocarditis. Unequivocal. These are autopsy-confirmed cases. So for all the mothers in the room, how would they feel if they found their children dead after taking a COVID-19 vaccine? This is in the peer-reviewed literature. This is not misinformation. Everyone should be paying attention to this. This is not conjecture. This is in the peer-reviewed literature.
Dr. Peter McCullough, a leading expert on cardiology, as he has been well before the pandemic and well after, continuing to sound the alarm as he has for years after the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines. What is signaled this week from the New England Journal of Medicine and FDA Commissioner Marty Makary is a good first step in starting to roll back the totality of the COVID-19 vaccines. But it cannot be the only step. And finally, poll of the week, I asked you if you were in the position of the police officers in that that crazy video out of New Mexico showing that 7 and 9-year-old playing with the loaded weapon. If you were in the position of one of the police officers who responded to that call, what would you be willing to do? What would you be willing to do? I think a few people thought that this was critiquing the police officers. No, not really. I thought they did, in this particular instance, they did a fine job. And you could hear the officer, I pointed that out yesterday, the officer who actually ended up firing the less lethal rounds. I mean, he did not want to even do that. And so you can hear them doing this math in real time. I think it's really illustrative, actually, of the positions that officers find themselves in every now and again, where they're trying to do this math on the fly. It's easy for us to sit around and pontificate and try to ponder the lint in our navel, which is exactly what we're doing. Let's give the officers credit for that. It's really easy for us, but even then, it's a difficult call. So I gave you 3 options. What are you willing to do if you were in the position of those officers? Less lethal, like what they used, deadly force, or neither? Here's what you had to say. Zach says it depends on the situation. Every scenario is different. And if they have the ability to use non-lethal rounds, I believe they should do so, especially with children being involved. Obviously, not every scenario is like this, not to mention the use of deadly force would likely result in media outrage, and probably rightfully so, in my opinion. Well, this gets back to, though, are you really, that was a loaded gun, a real gun. It wasn't a BB gun. Are you really willing, Are you really willing to put your own children in the position of not having a father or a parent because other parents sucked at doing their job? And yeah, would you rather be judged by 12 than buried by 6? That's kind of what we're talking about here. At least that's the stakes at play. So, Zach, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, in that moment, you have to think on some level, those officers are saying, I don't care if we get lynched for this. I'll take my chances after this if these kids are going to really start firing bullets at me. Jeff says, keyword in your question for me is willing. That's correct. You deduced that correctly. I would expect that from my best friend from childhood, knowing exactly what the operative word was there. There's a quote, I can't remember where from. The bullet doesn't care who pulls the trigger. Kids are capable of killing. Everyone should be ready to defend themselves. That's kind of where I'm coming down on this, unfortunately, as terrible as that sounds. Now, having said that, I would exhaust every single non-lethal opportunity, non-lethal remedy, before I was actually willing to use that type of force. But if all of those were exhausted and the kid pops around, points a loaded gun at me, sorry, that's awful. It's an awful situation. But that's kind of where I would come down on that as well. Jenna says the cops did a great job. Agree with that. Don't Drone Me, Bro says, watching it one time and only knowing what is available in this 2-minute clip, the response seemed appropriate. Yeah, again, they did a good job. Follow Truth says, based on this video, I think the officers handled this appropriately. I would bet these boys have seen in real life, what no 7-year-old should see at this age. Yeah, that's also tragically true. Follow Truth says, was that mom asking her son to drop the gun and he refused? Parents should be arrested and prosecuted. Well, parents should be arrested and prosecuted. In this case, that seems pretty cut and dried, but there have been other cases around the country of, yes, older children, teenagers, who have taken their parents' weapons or stolen their parents' weapons and tried, or in some cases successfully carried out, mass shootings. Their parents were charged. Is it right then? Is it right to charge the parents then? I would say no, because those children, they're teenagers. You know, what constitutes an adult legally is not really the same thing biologically. So where's that cutoff point? So that's another stipulation here in terms of what should happen to the parents. Tom Cumber says, I think police officers handled a terrible situation the best way they could. Yep, again, I'm not asking you to critique the police here. I'm asking you what you would be willing to do in this situation. Deanna Vizentine says, it would depend on if the officer thought the kid could get off a lethal shot. In this incident, the officer chose the right response. River City says, beanbag. Yeah. ATB says, be willing to do. A police officer always has to be willing to meet lethal force with lethal force and intent. Their actions were appropriate, but they had to be willing to use lethal force if, say, one of the kids ran out firing at them. Exactly right. Exactly right. Tom Bazika says, in this situation, less lethal force is appropriate. Well, yeah, it's appropriate, but what are you willing to do if it was not sufficient? Erica says, less lethal if at all possible. Fred says, less lethal. The cops did a good job here. Arrest the parents. Again, are you sure you want to arrest the parents here? Because I've seen a lot of right-wingers say this is unjust when parents are arrested or charged when their older children take a gun and try to commit violent acts. So are you sure you want to do that? Sarah Hanna says the actions of the police were completely justified. Again, not asking you what you thought about what these cops did, but the way those boys were playing past the gun, one of them could have easily been shot. The beanbag round successfully scared and distracted the boys so that an officer could safely disarm them. Also glad they got cuffed. Joe Lynch says, we didn't have tasers back when I served. Honestly, probably would have taken my chances and tried to disarm without anything. I don't know that I could live with myself otherwise, but see, I'm sympathetic to that too. Even though I'm coming down on the side of, I would be willing, if it came down to it and all other options were exhausted, I'd be willing to use lethal force. I'm also sympathetic to this because that's undeniably true. Even if you were willing to, you have to live with the aftermath of that, both personally, professionally, and publicly. Todd says, based on the video, that boy was going to shoot. The rubber bullet should make the reality of the situation clear to him and both of them. The situation was resolved, preserving life. God help the boys. Amen to that. Andy W. says, I voted less lethal, but I'm making it hurt. Good point, because I don't think either of those rounds actually hit the kids. Sudden adult death season says, not a law officer of any kind, but I would want to put the fear of God into those kids because by the video, it looks as if nobody is. Yeah, I mean, canine unit. Again, a canine could be very, very, long-term harmful to the kids as well, but that's better than dying or shooting. John says, that's a rough one. I selected number 2. That would be deadly force. John says he selected number 2 because I'm willing to do that rather than get shot. I'd certainly try less lethal first, but what are the options? Tear gas, pepper bombs? Daniel says, I'd use the same force applied in the video. Then I'd do the exact same thing to the parents because how do kids that young get a loaded gun in their hands like that? I know. So what do you do with the parents here? What do you do with the parents? Obviously, I think on firearms charges, I think maybe a separate conversation because I think some of the cases that I'm thinking about where parents have been charged, I think they've been charged for like manslaughter and things of that, which is not necessarily appropriate because they weren't the ones doing the killing, in my estimation. But obviously, the parents have to be charged with something here. They have to. I agree with that. It depends on what the what is. Live Free or Die says, tear gas, pepper spray, and or taser. They're kids who by no fault of their own are playing dangerously and may have been brainwashed to hate police given the circumstances. There will be outcry no matter what, so publicly arrest the adults no matter the outcome. Got a lot of responses to this poll of the week. I appreciate each and every one of you. Tomorrow is another edition of Ask or Tell Me Anything on the AM Update. You can ask me any question you want. Tell me any news story you think needs covered that I didn't get to this week. Let me know. Make your submissions. Look for the pinned post at Real AM Update on X. That'll do it for Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.